Well, I come from Buenos Aires, and I study art in Buenos Aires. And after going to the School of Fine Arts, that was for 7 years, there were 3 years at the beginning that they are like a high school in art, and then 4 more years that is in a place called Escuela Nacional de Bellas Artes, which is like a college. And after that, I studied ceramics in a private studio with an artist. And at the same time, I began to go to the studio of a sculptor in Buenos Aires because I had an idea I wanted to do sculptures too that I didn't do it in the school. Because you began to do sculpture at school when you were already in your 6th year of school. And then you can choose a specialty. So after you chose your specialty, one was drawing and painting, and then it was another one that was drawing and etchings, and drawing and sculpture. So as you see, drawing was very important. We had drawing every day. The school was mandatory, and we had 6 hours a day, and we were having drawing every day of the week. Sometimes there were the 6 hours of the day, sometimes we could have 3 hours or 1, but never none. And with that, we had already anatomy, we had geometry, we had perspective, we had French, we had history of art, 7 years. And everything was mandatory. When we finished the school, we really had a very good education in art. Because I wanted to do sculpture too, so I went to a very demanding sculptor from Argentina, very classic, and I worked with him for 4 or 5 more years teaching. And he kept me working, drawing for 3 years and a half, and after that, then I began to do sculpture. So you can imagine it was a very demanding time. You had to work very hard. So I'm saying all that just for people probably to understand why I work like I work. I had a very academic, classic education, and I never could go very far from it, and I don't want to go far from it. I really strongly believe that art should be taught in a very classic way, and then once you come out from school, you can do whatever you like. You can throw away what you learned, but you will never forget, and that will work better for you and your work. These are one of my first works, and they belong to a series called The Magic Space, and it is completely graphite and white paper, and that was the introduction in reality to a larger series that I made called The City. Now we are in front of 4 or 5 pieces that belong to the series The City. And I showed that series around the late 70s. And it's completely graphite pencil over a German paper called Schuler Parole. So now we go to the city, the color in the city. And I made, because the inspiration of that work came from one night, a very rainy night, and we were in the car with my husband, and the reflections of the street lights, the green, the red, and the yellow, were moving on the floor. The floor was very wet, of course, and what happened is that gave me the inspiration just to work at dark night with these 3 colors. And once they came out, I began to feel very happy and comfortable with them and continue working with them. These 2 pieces that I'm showing here belong to the series The Spheres. What happened is that I was invited to a very important show for me, being so young, and at that moment all the very recognized and much older artists invited me to be in the show with them. So I went, I was desperate and wanted to show that I could work and be really, they made them proud of me. So I worked very hard and I came with that image that after that, it gave me, probably there were 12 ideas of different works from the spheres, and this is how it became a new series called the Spheres. And many of them, I don't have them because they were already sold. This work is the Red series and comes from the Spheres series. And I made only 10 pieces, and I must say I only have one that I made especially for my husband as a present. All the other ones were gone, they were sold. And these are on paper, and they have a base of ink, and over everything I work first with a color pencil, and then the last layer was a graphite layer. That is it. This is a series that I began, I don't know why, it came from nowhere and went to nowhere, because I began to work with that, I couldn't stop. It was something like, it was a burst from inside me, and that was during the time of the dirty war in Argentina with the militaries and the desaparecidos. And it is a very dramatic, very hard, these are very hard pieces to look at them, because they are really very painful. They were very painful for me too, and painful for all my friends that came to the show. The gallery did a special show for them, and nobody dared to say a word, including the art reviewers. Nobody said a word about the show. It was a very silent show. But after that, it became it propelled me to a kind of, to another stage in my career. They stopped thinking about me like a young artist, and I could show that I was really showing in my work that everything that was happening around us, I could show that in my work. And I'm very proud of that series, but it doesn't belong to anything, doesn't come from any of the other works. It came by itself, and after 14 or 15 pieces, it disappeared. And incredible to think is when the militaries decided to call elections and have a democratic government, so that series disappeared. It's incredible, and I don't have any explanation. What happened to me is it was like a medium in between what was going on in the country, in a way, and what's going on with us, with the people, with everybody. But after that series, I wasn't the same, and what it shows is in the series Caprichos. And this series, I finished with the series, The Infamy, that this is the name. We went to Europe. And there was a very interesting show about Goya's works. There were drawings and etching called Los Caprichos de la Guerra, which means the war caprichos. It's very difficult to translate, but it is like an impronto of something that is happening in a moment, and this is what you are trying to show. So I made 50 or 55 pieces that I made, and then in 1989, when I was almost gone from Argentina, the Museum of Modern Art invited me to show them, and this is when I showed 52 pieces of the series Caprichos. The following three ones that I show you at the screen, they belong to the Caprichos series too, but they had lots of color. And I thought I was going to make them a little bit happier, but they were very dramatic too, and probably this is how I am. When people come to my shows, they're always asking me the same: where are the images coming from where they are coming? And it's not easy to explain. Do you know, I remember There is just somebody telling a story about Picasso that he was standing in front of his old works in a house of one of his collectors, and he was looking at that work he didn't see for a long time. And somebody approached him and said, well, what do you think? It's not bad, he said. It's not bad at all. And they said, why? How do you know when you finish a work? And Picasso said, when the other left me. And this is a little bit as a feeling. It's like we are a medium. We are just in the middle, in between the hidden reality that is inside us and the everyday reality. And there is, for me, it is impossible to escape that kind of two realities. They always intrigue me terribly, and I never could dominate it. They always dominate me. So the images are coming out, like the French will say, malgré moi. I just take them out and I work with them. And I try to understand them because many times things that are coming from inside us, they are very difficult to understand. Because it's very difficult to understand ourselves. This is my feeling. We are very complicated, and although I'm talking about two realities, we are surrounded by different realities. I believe it's not the duty of an artist, but it's like the lot of an artist. Just do whatever your unconscious is dictating you, in a way. But once it comes out, and it's in that piece, and there is the other, it's another person. It's a dialogue with the other too. So it's another person intervening and telling me sometimes things that I never thought that somebody could see them in my work. And that makes me richer, it enriches my work, and enriches, I hope, the other person too. After all, this is the pursuing, in a way. It's just to touch a little bit people and give them, if it's possible, a little bit of emotion. We really don't know what we are capable of doing. And once they are beginning to come out, it's that you look, sometimes you are not admiring your work, but if you are in love with yourself, you can admire your work. I'm not in love with myself. It's like you are, sometimes you can be proud of yourself because you say, well, this is something I did and I'm doing. I never thought it was going to happen to me, and it's happening. It sometimes makes me feel like I am like there is a word in Spanish called "set duende." It's like a ghost coming, walking through the street. I told you the story about that. The art reviewer at the Buenos Aires Herald, she came to one of my shows, and then she wrote, "A lunatic is walking through the streets of Buenos Aires at night." And she loved my show. And she said, because it was the city, and she said that it was giving her completely a different approach to what the meaning of the city through my work. And that made me, it makes me so happy to see that I can add something to people's life, if it's possible for me. So that's good. But I love that thing. I was so happy when she wrote. Just to finish with something that it touched me very, very deeply, and it was Octavio Paz talking in one of his books. He's writing about what is the meaning for him to about poetry, and he says that the poet writes with a clear word about the most obscure parts of our being. And I always thought that that can be translated to music or to visual arts and to dancing and everything that can be expressed through your sensibility and your body because there is a lot of body work in visual arts too. The strokes with a pencil or the brush, or the strokes of color, and the work you work, the light and the shadows and everything, are really a lot of movement. What he did is, in a way, he illuminated with what he said, my sometimes lack of explanation of my own work, and that gave me a wonderful opportunity to say, well, okay, this is what is happening. And I was just bold enough to bring them out and then show them to people. And this is what I did. It makes me very happy to show them here at the museum. I always a little bit of nervous, and I'm never sure if I like to show or not. But I'm really glad that I'm showing them. And I'm showing completely so many images. So I hope people will not be tired of looking at them.